The drill had been running for 16 hours when it finally broke through into empty space. Dr. Cole stood in the freezing control room, watching the monitors with tired eyes. 3 miles beneath the Antarctic ice, something impossible was waiting for them. "We have a cavity," said Dr. Price, her voice shaking with excitement. "The readings don't make sense. The space down there is huge, and it's warm." Moved closer to the screen. The thermal imaging showed a massive chamber, perfectly circular, maintaining a steady temperature of 68 degrees despite being surrounded by ancient ice. Nothing natural could do that. Nothing human could have built it either, not 3 miles down, not in a place where the ice was 50,000 years old. Captain Daniel Vance entered the room, snow still clinging to his military jacket. He was their security liaison, assigned by the United States government to oversee what was supposed to be a simple geological survey. But there was nothing simple about this anymore. "What do we have?" he asked. "Something that shouldn't exist," replied. "We need to go down there." The descent took 4 hours, and Vance rode in a specially designed capsule, dropping through the narrow tunnel the drill had carved. None of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of the cable lowering them into the darkness. When the capsule doors opened, they stepped into a cathedral of light. The chamber was enormous, easily a 1/4 mile across. The walls were made of some material that glowed with a soft blue radiance, illuminating everything in gentle light. Strange symbols covered every surface, flowing in patterns that seemed almost alive. And at the center of it all, on a raised platform of white stone, lay a figure. Gasped, felt his legs go weak. The figure was humanoid but massive, 12 feet tall, encased in armor that seemed to be made of liquid silver frozen in place. Its face was visible through a transparent section of the helmet, and despite its size, despite everything impossible about this moment, the face was unmistakably human. A man, perhaps 40 years old, with strong features and closed eyes. He looked like he was sleeping. "This is impossible," Vance whispered. "The ice above us is 50,000 years old. Humans didn't exist here 50,000 years ago. We were barely using stone tools." "Maybe we were wrong about that," said quietly. Approached a console near the platform. It was covered in the same flowing symbols, but as she got closer, some of them began to glow brighter. She reached out without thinking and touched the surface. The entire chamber hummed with sudden energy. The symbols on the walls began to move, flowing like rivers of light. The console projected images into the air above it, images of stars and planets, of great ships crossing the void between worlds, of cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. And the figure on the platform opened its eyes. They burned with golden light, bright enough to cast shadows across the chamber. The giant sat up slowly, turning its head to look at the 3 humans who stood frozen before it. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds, bypassing language entirely. "How long?" the being asked. Found his voice somehow. "We don't understand. How long since what?" "Since I was placed here, since the fall." Checked her instruments with shaking hands. "The ice above this chamber is approximately 53,000 years old. Whatever you are, you've been here at least that long." The being was silent for a moment. Then it rose from the platform, its movements fluid despite its size. It stood before them, and even Vance, who had faced death many times in combat, took a step backward. "I am Sentinel," the being said. "I am a warden, created by the first dominion of Earth to protect humanity in their time of darkness. I was placed here when your ancestors chose to hide rather than die. I was meant to sleep until you were ready to remember who you truly are." "First dominion of Earth," shook his head. "Humanity has never had a dominion. We've never left our own planet. We only developed writing 5,000 years ago." Something like sadness crossed its ancient face. "You have forgotten everything. That was the plan. To hide you so completely that even you would not know what you once were. Your ancestors ruled 1,000 worlds, Dr. Cole. They built wonders that you cannot imagine, and they were nearly destroyed by an enemy that still hunts among the stars." The chamber shook. Dust fell from somewhere far above. His expression changed, becoming alert and dangerous. "They have found me. My awakening sent a signal across the galaxy. Someone has come to ensure you never learn the truth." Vance drew his sidearm, though he knew it would be useless against whatever was coming. "Who? What's happening?" Though they remember what humanity once was, they have feared this day for 50,000 years. Began walking toward the tunnel that led to the surface. "Your species was hidden here to survive. I was left to protect you until you could protect yourselves. It seems my work begins now." Far above the ice, something was happening in the sky. The research team on the surface watched in horror as the clouds parted and dark shapes descended. Ships, clearly not of Earth origin, massive and angular and bristling with weapons. They moved into position above the base with terrible precision. In the command ship, High Prelate studied the readings from below. The warden was awake. After all these, one of them still lived. This changed everything. "We must destroy it now," said to his officers, "before it can restore their knowledge, before the humans can become again what they once were." "The Concordat will not approve this action," one officer warned. "The Concordat does not understand. They have forgotten the old wars. They have forgotten what the humans did to our ancestors, how they conquered and ruled and reshaped the galaxy according to their will. If the warden survives, if humanity remembers, everything we have built will burn." He gave the order. Plasma fire rained down on the ice, vaporizing the research base in seconds. The human scientists died without ever understanding why. The attack continued, drilling down through the ice toward the chamber below, toward the last remnant of humanity's forgotten glory. And from the tunnel, walking calmly through fire and destruction, Sentinel emerged into the Antarctic night. He looked up at the alien fleet that filled the sky, at the weapons that had been designed to kill gods. Behind him, Vance stumbled out of the access tunnel, coughing and terrified but alive. Had shielded them somehow, wrapped them in light that kept the fire away. "Stay behind me," said quietly. "I remember how to do this." He raised his hand toward the sky. The galaxy had hoped humanity would never remember. They were about to learn that hope was not enough. The plasma fire that fell from the fleet was hot enough to melt steel. It turned ice into steam and stone into glass. The research base had vanished in the first moments of the attack, and now the alien weapons were focused on the single figure standing in the snow. Pulled behind a ridge of ice, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. Vance crouched beside them, his useless pistol still in his hand. They watched as stood motionless against the storm of fire. The plasma struck something invisible a few feet above his head and spread outward like water hitting glass. It flowed around him in rivers of light, beautiful and terrible, touching nothing. The warden had not moved at all. "They cannot harm me with such weapons," said, his voice somehow clear despite the roar of the attack. "They have forgotten much. Allow me to remind them." He raised his hand slowly, palm facing the sky. For a moment nothing happened. Then saw it, a ripple in the air above his fingers like heat rising from summer pavement. The ripple expanded, growing brighter, taking shape. What happened next would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. A beam of pure white light shot upward from his palm. It struck the nearest ship and passed through it without slowing. The ship did not explode. It simply came apart, dissolving into glowing dust that scattered on the wind. The beam continued upward, striking a second ship, then a third. Each one died the same way, silently, completely. The remaining ships tried to flee. They turned and accelerated, their engines burning bright against the dark sky. Lowered his hand for a moment, then raised it again. This time the light was different, a web of golden threads that spread across the sky like a net. The fleeing ship struck the web and stopped, held in place by forces that human science could not explain. "You came to murder children in their cradle," said, and now his voice carried to every ship, to every officer. "You came to bury the truth forever, but I remember what humanity once was, and I will not allow you to erase them again." He closed his fist. The remaining ships crumbled like paper, their crews dying in the instant between heartbeats. Debris rained down across the ice, burning fragments that hissed and steamed as they landed. In 11 minutes, a fleet that could have conquered any nation on Earth had ceased to exist. Lowered his hand. The glow faded from his armor. He turned to look at the 3 humans who huddled behind the ridge of ice. "It is done," he said. "But this is only the beginning. Others will come. We have much to discuss." Hours later, they sat in a tent that rescue teams had erected near the ruins of the base. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows on their faces. Held a cup of coffee that he had not touched. Was recording everything on a small device, her scientific training demanding documentation even in the face of impossibility. Vance had managed to contact his superiors, but he had not told them the full truth. He was not sure they would believe him. Sat with them, his massive form somehow making the small space feel even smaller. He had shrunk himself somehow, realized. The warden was now only about 7 feet tall, still huge, but not as overwhelming as before. Perhaps he had done it to make them more comfortable. The thought that this being, this weapon, would care about their comfort was somehow more frightening than everything else. "Tell us everything," said, "from the beginning." Was quiet for a long moment. "Your species did not evolve on this world," he said finally. "You were seated here, hidden here, after a war that nearly destroyed your entire civilization. 53,000 years ago, humanity ruled an empire that spanned 100,000 stars. You were not alone in the galaxy. There were other species, other civilizations, but none were as powerful as the first dominion of Earth." "That's impossible," said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We would have found evidence, artifacts, ruins, something." Everything was erased. That was the point. Your ancestors understood that if any trace remained, your enemies would find you and finish what they started. So they buried the technology, sealed the archives, and scattered the survivors across 1,000 forgotten worlds. Then they made you forget. They altered your very genes to suppress the memories, the abilities, everything that made you what you were. Vance leaned forward. "What abilities?" Smiled slightly. "You are not merely intelligent animals, Captain. Your species was engineered by your own ancestors over millions of years. You have potential that you have never accessed, power that sleeps in every cell of your bodies. In time, with guidance, you could become again what you once were." "And what was that?" asked. "Gods," said simply, "or the closest thing to gods that the universe has ever seen. Your ancestors built stars. They moved planets. They created beings like me to serve them, weapons that could shatter moons and heal the sick and travel between dimensions. The galaxy feared them and them in equal measure." The tent was silent. Outside, the Antarctic wind howled against the fabric. "What happened?" finally asked. "How did gods fall?" Pain crossed his face, the first truly human emotion had seen from him. There was a faction within the Dominion that believed humanity had grown too powerful. They called themselves the Humble. They thought that your ancestors had become monsters, that the power had corrupted them beyond redemption. So they betrayed their own species. They opened the gates to an enemy from beyond the galactic rim, a force we call the Hollow. "What is the Hollow?" "We never fully understood. They are not life as you know it. They are something older, something that exists between dimensions. They consume. That is their only purpose. They consume matter, energy, thought, time. They came into our galaxy like a plague, and even the Dominion could not stop them." Stood and walked to the tent's entrance, looking out at the frozen wasteland. The war lasted 1,000 years. Billions died. Entire star systems were devoured. In the end, your ancestors realized they could not win, so they chose to hide. They scattered humanity across the galaxy, erased their memories, and destroyed almost everything they had built. The Hollow eventually lost interest in a galaxy that seemed to hold nothing of value. They beyond the rim, but they are still there, waiting. Felt cold that had nothing to do with the Antarctic air. Why did you wake up? You said there were conditions. 2 conditions. I would awaken if humanity faced extinction or if your species reached a certain technological threshold. Neither of those triggered my return. Turned to face them, and his golden eyes held something that might have been fear. I awoke because the Hollow has returned. Their vanguard crossed into this galaxy 3 months ago. They are coming back to finish what they started. This recording device slipped from her fingers. How long do we have? Perhaps 50 years before the main fleet arrives. Perhaps less. Walked back to them, and despite his terrifying power, his voice was gentle. But you are not helpless. You are the descendants of the greatest civilization the universe has ever known. The potential your ancestors locked away still lives in your blood. My purpose is to help you unlock it. To fight a war we can't possibly win, Vance asked bitterly. To remember who you are, corrected. The First Dominion fought the Hollow for 1,000 years and nearly won. You are their heirs. The question is not whether you can defeat this enemy. The question is whether you will become again what you once were. Outside, the first rescue helicopters were approaching, their lights cutting through the dark sky. The world was about to change. Nothing would ever be the same. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 different civilizations, the news was spreading. The humans had found their protector. The Warden had awakened. The galaxy watched and remembered its oldest fear. The video of the Antarctica battle spread across Earth within hours. Someone had been recording from a supply helicopter when the fleet appeared. The footage showed everything. The alien ships, the destruction of the research base, and the single figure who stood against the fire and broke an entire armada with a gesture. Panic spread faster than any government could contain it. Riots erupted in major cities. Churches filled with people seeking answers. Stock markets crashed and then crashed again. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they were not, and the universe was hostile. World leaders demanded answers. 3 days after the battle, a secret meeting was held at a secure facility in Switzerland. Presidents and prime ministers sat around a massive table, their advisors lining the walls. At the head of the table sat Sentinel, now appearing almost human in size, though nothing could make him seem ordinary. Beside him were, and Vance, the only humans who had spoken with him at length. "What do you want from us?" the American president asked. Her name was Laura, and she had aged 10 years in 3 days. "Why are you here?" "I want nothing from you," replied. "I was created to serve humanity. My purpose is to protect you and guide you until you can protect yourselves." "Protect us from what? More aliens coming to bomb us?" "There were fools who acted out of ancient fear. They will not return, but they are not the true threat." Projected images into the air above the table, images that made several leaders gasp. This is the Hollow. They are coming, and they will not stop until they have consumed everything in this galaxy. The images showed worlds being devoured, stars going dark, entire civilizations screaming and dying as something terrible swept through them. It was horror beyond imagination. "When?" someone asked, voice barely above a whisper. 50 years, perhaps less. The room erupted in panicked conversation, waited until they fell silent again. "You have time," he said, "not much but enough. Your ancestors fought this enemy for 1,000 years. They built weapons that could hurt the Hollow. They developed strategies that worked. All of that knowledge exists within my memory. I can share it with you." "Can we win?" President asked. "That depends on you. The First Dominion had millions of ships and billions of warriors. They had technology that you cannot yet imagine, and still the war nearly destroyed them. You are starting with nothing. You will need to become something greater than you have ever been." The French president leaned forward. You said our ancestors. You mean that story about humans once ruling the galaxy, that we were some kind of empire? It is not a story. It is history that was deliberately erased, projected new images. These showed something different, great cities floating among the stars, ships larger than moons, humans walking alongside beings of light and energy. The first dominion of Earth lasted for 2 million years. Your species was not born on this planet. You evolved on a world closer to the galactic core billions of years ago. Through patience and determination, you rose to become the most powerful civilization the universe has ever known. If we were so powerful, why did we fall? Because power corrupts, because even gods can lose their way. The expression grew heavy with old grief. A faction within the Dominion believed humanity had become a threat to itself and others. They called themselves the Humble, and they believed the only way to save your species was to destroy everything you had built and start again. They opened the gates to the Hollow. They helped your enemies nearly exterminate you. Spoke up, the Humble were human. We did this to ourselves. Yes, the greatest threat to humanity has always been humanity itself, but you also have the greatest capacity for redemption. That is why I still have hope. The meeting continued for hours, answered every question with patience. He explained the history that had been erased. He described the galaxy as it truly was, filled with species that had watched humanity's fall with relief and now watched their resurgence with terror. He outlined what would be needed to prepare for the Hollow. Not everyone believed him. Some could not accept that everything they knew about human history was a lie. Others refused to believe that an enemy so powerful could exist. But most understood the truth when they looked into his golden eyes. This was not a deception. This was real. As the meeting ended, the Chinese president asked one final question. The other species in this galaxy, will they help us fight the Hollow? His answer was cold. They would rather you die. Your ancestors were not gentle rulers. They conquered and reshaped the galaxy according to their will. The species that survived the Dominion have spent 50,000 years celebrating your absence. Many of them would side with the Hollow if it meant seeing humanity destroyed forever. Then we stand alone. For now, but that may change. When the Hollow comes, the galaxy will have to choose between their hatred of you and their own survival. Your ancestors inspired both terror and awe. Perhaps you can find a way to inspire only the latter. In the weeks that followed, the world transformed. Governments that had been enemies began working together. Resources that had been wasted on petty conflicts were redirected toward a single purpose. Began sharing fragments of ancient technology, carefully chosen to advance human capabilities without causing chaos. The first faster-than-light engine was built within a year. It was crude compared to what the Dominion had possessed, but it worked. A small ship carried 3 astronauts beyond the solar system and back in a matter of hours. Humanity had taken its first step back toward the stars. But not everyone welcomed the change. A movement arose calling itself the Earthborn. Their leader was a politician named Gregory Lane, a charismatic speaker who drew crowds of thousands. He argued that humanity should reject its violent heritage. He said that was manipulating them, preparing them to fight a war that could not be won. He believed peace with the Hollow was possible if only humanity would humble itself. "We are not gods," Lane declared at a rally that was broadcast around the world. "We are simple beings on a small planet. If some ancient empire fell because of its arrogance, we should learn from that mistake, not repeat it. This creature tells us to build weapons. I say we should build bridges. I say we should reach out to the Hollow with open hands and show them that the humans of today are not the monsters of the past." Watch the broadcast in silence. When it ended, he turned to and "He is not entirely wrong," said. "The First Dominion was arrogant. They did terrible things to the species they conquered. If humanity rises again only to repeat those mistakes, then perhaps this species does deserve to fall." "But the Hollow doesn't negotiate," said. "You told us that." No, they consume. It is all they know. But Lane is popular because he speaks to a real fear. People do not want to become monsters to survive monsters. Your species must find a different path. You must become powerful enough to defeat the Hollow without becoming the kind of rulers your ancestors were. Stared out the window at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Hollow was coming. Somewhere out there, ancient enemies watched and waited. And somewhere inside every human being, dormant potential waited to be awakened. Can we do both? He asked. Can we have the power without becoming what they were? Was quiet for a long moment. That is the question that will determine whether your species survives or falls forever. I do not know the answer. Only you can find it. The stars seemed brighter than remembered. He wondered if it was his imagination or if his eyes were already beginning to change. 10 years passed faster than anyone expected. Cole stood on the observation deck of the newly built orbital station and watched Earth turn slowly below. He was 57 now, his hair more gray than brown, but his eyes held a sharpness that had not dimmed with age. Behind him, construction drones swarmed over the skeleton of humanity's first true warship. The vessel was called the Dawn, and it was massive. 1/2 mile long, built with recovered Dominion technology that had helped them understand. It would not have impressed the ancient empire, but for a species that had never left its own solar system, it was a miracle. Admiral Daniel Vance walked up beside him. The former captain had aged well in his new role, his military bearing giving him an authority that others naturally followed. He commanded Earth's growing fleet, such as it was. 12 ships so far, with another 20 under construction. Not nearly enough for what was coming. The third colony ship launched this morning, Vance said. 3,000 people heading for 442b. That makes 5 colonies now. 20,000 humans living among the stars. Nodded, and the Concordat. Still watching, still waiting. Ambassador is requesting another meeting with the Council. The Galactic Concordat was the governing body that united most of the galaxy's advanced species. They had sent Ambassador, a diplomat, to Earth 3 years ago. They were tall and elegant, with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. They had been a minor power during the Dominion era, too small to attract much attention, too scattered to conquer easily. Now they considered themselves the voices of reason in a frightened galaxy. Its mission was simple. She wanted humanity to join the Concordat as a junior member, subject to their oversight and limitations. In exchange, the Concordat would share the burden of the coming war and ensure that humanity did not become a threat to galactic peace. Had advised against accepting, understood why. The Concordat doesn't want allies, said. They want guarantees. They want to make sure we never become what we once were. Can you blame them? Vance asked quietly. From what has shown us, the First Dominion wasn't exactly gentle with its subjects. No, but putting ourselves under their control won't save us from the Hollow. It will just make us easier to sacrifice when the time comes. They walked together to the meeting room where Ambassador was waiting. She sat at a curved table, her silver features arranged in an expression of polite patience. Beside her were 2 observers, their faces unreadable. They had been forced to send diplomats after their failed attack. They hated it, but the Concordat had given them no choice. Was already there, along with several human officials. She had become director of the Reclamation Project, the massive effort to decode the archives within its memory and recover humanity's lost technology. She nodded as he took his seat. Ambassador said, "Thank you for your patience." Smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. The Concordat understands that humanity is facing difficult decisions. We simply wish to help you make the right ones. And what are the right ones? The Concordat is prepared to offer full military support against the Hollow threat. Our combined fleets are substantial. Our technology, while not equal to what you might eventually develop, is proven and reliable. All we ask in return is your agreement to certain limitations. What limitations? Smile faded slightly. The warden must be deactivated. Your weapons development must proceed under Concordat supervision, and any human colonies outside your solar system must accept Concordat governance. The room went cold, felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. You want us to give up our protector, our weapons, and our freedom. In exchange for your help fighting an enemy you admit you cannot defeat alone. We are offering partnership. You are offering chains. One of the observers made a harsh clicking sound. The humans show their true nature, just as our ancestors warned. Give them power and they demand dominion. Turn to face the directly. Your ancestors tried to murder us in our sleep. Forgive me if I don't value their wisdom. The meeting deteriorated from there. Tried to salvage the discussion, but the damage was done. When the Concordat delegation finally left, their expressions made it clear that humanity had made enemies today. Found on the observation deck an hour later, he was staring at the stars again, lost in thought. That could have gone better, she said. They were never going to offer real help, warned us. The Concordat would rather see us destroyed than watch us rise again. So what do we do? What we've been doing: build, prepare, and hope we have enough time. Time was the one thing they never had enough of. The next decade brought progress and problems in equal measure. More colonies were established. The fleet grew to 30 ships, then 50. Scientists unlocked secrets that would have seemed like magic a generation earlier, and throughout it all, trained a new generation of human warriors. The warden spent hours each day with young volunteers, teaching them to access abilities they never knew they possessed. It turned out that the genetic locks placed on humanity by their ancestors could be partially opened through intense training and focus. The results were modest: enhanced strength, sharper senses, faster reactions, but they proved that the potential had described was real. Sun was among the first volunteers. He had inherited his father's curiosity and his mother's courage. By the time he was 25, he had risen to lieutenant commander in the fleet, watched his son grow into a warrior, and felt both pride and fear in equal measure. The Earthborn movement had grown as well. Gregory Lane now commanded millions of followers. He had been elected to several national offices and was pushing for a global referendum on whether humanity should pursue peace with the Hollow. His message of humility and reconciliation appealed to those who feared what humanity might become. He's not wrong about our ancestors, admitted during a private conversation with End. The First Dominion did terrible things. Entire species were enslaved. Worlds were destroyed for the crime of disobedience. If humanity rises again only to repeat those sins, then perhaps this species does not deserve to survive. Then what should we do? Asked. Find a better way. Your ancestors had power without wisdom. Perhaps you can develop wisdom before the power comes. Paused, his golden eyes distant. There are other wardens, you know. I was not the only one created. 11 others were placed on worlds across the galaxy, sleeping as I slept, waiting for humanity to call them home. Can we find them? Perhaps. The archives contain fragments of information about their locations. If you could wake them, their combined knowledge would accelerate your development dramatically. It was a mission for the next generation. Was too old to lead expeditions to distant stars, but was not. 3 years later, Lieutenant Commander Cole led the first expedition to search for another warden. His ship, the Pathfinder, carried 50 crew members and the best technology humanity could build. They disappeared into the void with hope and determination. Watched them go from the observation deck, at his side. Do you think he'll find them? She asked. I think he'll try, and that's all any of us can do. The galaxy continued to watch. The Hollow continued to approach, and humanity continued to prepare for a war that would decide the fate of everything. 20 years after its awakening, the first Hollow scouts were detected at the edge of the galaxy. The final countdown had begun. The hollow vanguard emerged from the darkness between galaxies like a wound opening in space. Thousands of ships, if they could be called ships, things of twisted metal and living tissue that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. They fell upon the outer Concordat worlds without warning and without mercy. The died first, then the industrial stations of then the garden planets of three species exterminated in 30 days. The galaxy that had feared humanity's return now sent desperate pleas for help. Admiral Daniel Vance, now 70 years old but still commanding from the Bridge of the Dawn, received the distress calls with grim satisfaction. The same species that had tried to limit humanity, that had demanded the deactivation of their protector, now begged for salvation. "We should let them burn," said his tactical officer, a young woman named Sophie Grant whose parents had died in the attack 20 years earlier. "No," Vance replied. "That's exactly what our ancestors would have done, and we have to be better than them." The human fleet, now numbering over 200 ships, mobilized toward Concordat space. It was the largest military operation in 50,000 years, and leading the vanguard in a ship called the Redemption was Commander Cole. Watched the fleet depart from the observation deck on Mars, where he had retired 3 years earlier. He was 80 now, his body failing despite the medical advances had helped humanity develop. Stood beside him, equally aged, equally determined to see how the story would end. "He'll come back," said. "I know," smiled slightly. "He's too stubborn to die." The battle for the galaxy began at the edge of Concordat space, in a region that had once been home to 1,000,000. Now it was debris and darkness, the perfect place for humanity to make its stand. The hollow fleet outnumbered the humans 3-1. Their weapons were strange and terrible, energy beams that seemed to consume light itself, projectiles that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Human ships died by the dozens in the first hour of combat. But humanity had learned from the archives had shared. Their shields were designed to operate on frequencies the hollow could not easily penetrate. Their weapons were tuned to disrupt the dimensional anchors that held the hollow ships together, and their pilots had been trained by a being who remembered fighting this enemy 1,000 years ago. Cole pushed his ship into the heart of the hollow formation, his crew working with precision that bordered on the supernatural. The training had given them had changed them. They were still human, still mortal, but they could think faster, react quicker, endure more than any normal person. They were what their ancestors had designed humanity to become. "Target the command vessels," ordered. "They're the ones holding the formation together." The Redemption cut through the hollow fleet like a blade through water. Human ships followed in its wake, exploiting the gaps it created. For the first time in the battle, the hollow formations began to waver. But it was not enough. The vanguard was only a fraction of the hollow's true strength. To defeat the main fleet when it arrived, humanity needed more than technology and training. They needed to fully awaken. On Mars, Sentinel stood in the chamber where the final archive had been decoded, had spent 20 years working on it, and now she understood what it contained. A message from the founders of the First Dominion, and a key. "The genetic locks our ancestors placed on humanity can be removed," explained, her voice heavy with the weight of what she was saying. "Completely removed. The transformation will unlock every dormant ability your species has suppressed for 50,000 years. Humans will become what they were always meant to be." "And what happens to those who undergo the transformation?" asked. Hesitated. "Not everyone will survive. The process is violent. Those who are too old or too weak will die, but those who survive will be capable of things we can barely imagine." Looked at the data she had gathered. His golden eyes were dim now, flickering like candles in the wind. He had known this moment would come. The Wardens were designed to protect humanity until they could protect themselves. When that happened, the Wardens were meant to fade. "The choice must be given freely," he said. "I cannot command this. No one can." A broadcast was prepared, sent to every human in the galaxy. His voice reached them all, speaking directly into their minds as only he could. "Your ancestors built wonders and committed atrocities. They were not perfect beings, but they stood against the darkness when no one else could. That is your inheritance. What you do with it is your choice." 94% of humanity chose to undergo the transformation. The process began simultaneously across hundreds of worlds. People screamed as their bodies rewrote themselves from the inside out. Some died, their systems unable to handle the change. But most survived, and when they opened their eyes, those eyes burned with golden light. Felt the change take hold of him despite his age. His failing heart steadied. His clouded vision cleared. Strength flooded through muscles that had withered years ago. He looked at his hands, young again, and felt tears streaming down his face. Stood beside him, equally transformed. She was crying too. "We're what they wanted us to be," she whispered, "finally." But their joy was cut short when they realized was dying. The warden lay on the floor of the chamber, his light fading rapidly. The transformation had required energy, massive amounts of it, and had provided what he could. He had given everything he had left. Knelt beside him, taking his massive hand in both of hers. Joined her, and together they watched the last protector of Earth prepare to die. "I have watched your species for 60,000 years, said, his voice barely a whisper. "Sleeping but dreaming of you. You were scattered and broken, and still you built civilizations. You were alone in a hostile galaxy, and still you reached for the stars. The Dominion created me to be your protector." He smiled, and for the first time he looked not like an ancient weapon but like a proud father. "But you never needed me. You only needed time." His light faded, his eyes closed, and Sentinel, the last warden of the First Dominion, died as the species he had guarded for finally woke up. Across the galaxy, the Hollow paused its advance. Something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of reality itself. The prey they had hunted for 100,000 years was prey no longer. In the void near the ruin, Commander Cole felt the transformation take hold. His crew gasped as golden light filled the bridge. The ship itself seemed to respond, systems activating that no one had ever used, weapons charging that they had never known they possessed. Looked out at the Hollow fleet, at the nightmare that had consumed so many worlds. He felt no fear, only purpose. "All ships," he said, his voice carrying across every human vessel in the fleet. "We are what we were meant to be. Now let's show them what that means." The human fleet surged forward. This time, they did not merely fight. They burned like stars, weapons firing in frequencies the Hollow could not withstand, shields holding against attacks that should have destroyed them instantly. The nightmare that had devoured galaxies faced an enemy it could not consume. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Hollow vanguard had been annihilated, not rooted, not driven back, destroyed completely. 1 year later, the main Hollow fleet entered the galaxy. They were met by humanity reborn, the heirs of the First Dominion, the children of gods who had finally woken up. The war would last a century. It would cost billions of lives across thousands of worlds. But standing at the memorial's tomb had become, watching ships rise toward the stars with golden light trailing behind them, knew how it would end. Stood beside her, young again, strong again, ready to fight for as long as it took. Around them, humanity prepared for the longest war in history, not with fear but with determination. They had been given a second chance. They would not waste it. "Do you think we'll be different this time?" asked. "Better than our ancestors?" Considered the question carefully. "We'll try. That's all anyone can do, but I think was right. We never needed a protector. We just needed to remember who we are." The stars burned bright above them. The galaxy watched with fear and hope in equal measure, and for the first time in 100,000 years, the darkness was afraid. Humanity remembered now. and the galaxy would never forget.